What is going on, people? Welcome to Reo's Positive POV YouTube channel. And today, going to be doing something slightly a little bit different. I have got a guest along on the channel. The first time I've actually had someone on the channel to a video with me. So I'm very excited about this. And today we are discussing Anatomy of a Fall. We're going to find out, we're going to try and work out, did she or didn't she do it? For people who don't know, Anatomy of a Fall is a recent movie that has just come out starring Sandra Hüller, directed by Justin Triet, and it won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. It is a courtroom-based drama, and we'll get into a bit more of the details in relation to the plot, etc., etc. But Alex, why don't you give the listeners a little bit of a introduction to yourself, let them know who you are, what it is you do, and your thoughts and feelings towards the film.
Sure. Hi, guys. My name is Alex Billington. I run the site firstshowing.net. I've been on Reo's podcast once before, and I've been a follower of his for a while because I appreciate your opinions, and it's always exciting to hear what you have to say about films. And like you, I'm a film nerd. I love doing this. I love talking about films. Actually, one of my favorite things is at a festival, when you get out of a film, I love to come out and discuss it. I want to oh, what did you think? Why did you think this? What is this? What is this? Actually, some people get annoyed at me because I get out. I'm like, that's all I want to do. And they're sitting there being like, Alex, just marinate with it. Just sit with it. And I'm like, no, I want to dig into it. Anatomy of a Fall. Yeah. It's been on everyone's mind since Cannes. And that's where I saw it for my first time. I saw it at the end of the festival, actually. Like hours before it won the Palme d'Or is when I saw it. And, by then it had already received all this buzz, and I'm like, okay, let me see what it is. I found it very compelling. I found it, the whole point of the film is to debate and discuss it. There is no final answer presented on purpose, which is also, I think the film sits very nicely into the very popular worldwide fad of true crime right now, which is why the film is not a true thing. I think it relates a lot to true incidents and very, very realistic kind of murder cases or very realistic crime cases around the world, in America or in the UK or anywhere, even though this takes place in, the French Alps, right?
Correct. Yes.
And so, I've been fascinated because I saw it in Cannes, and then over the slow rollout over the next few months and eventually to its release, I've been following a lot of the buzz, and there's like a couple of things that bother me. First is that people are missing the connection it has to the staircase. Like a lot of the reviews I read in Cannes just completely ignore this. And then secondly is like the question of like, what's going on? What's the point of it? I've read a number of reviews where I'm like, I don't know if this critic understood the film or if they're adding something on it or projecting something on it. And then as much as I could like criticize the film, I think it's growing on me because the more I think about it, I'm like, you can't help but admit that she made a film that gets people talking and that they want it. And that, the biggest thing, which is kind of my opening intro before we get into it more, is this idea that, I give a lot of credit to Justin Triet for being able to make this film where she doesn't give the answers in the footage, but she also was able to craft enough scenes and enough intricate, what are you watching, to present both answers and to make you think, oh wow, look, what did this scene mean? What did that scene mean? So she's conscious and talented enough to craft each scene to present and to make audiences think, hey, I don't know which way to lean, or maybe I do lean this way because she shot it this way and because there's something happening in the scene and because there's something with the story and where it's going. So that's my opening intro.
Yeah, so you mentioned the staircase case, and for people that don't know, I don't know the intricate details of the case, but what I do know is that it seemed to be kind of shown and highlighted, and there was a little bit of a kind of a idea that this is inspired by that, based off a scene beginning of the film where the dog's ball drops down the stairs, the dog goes and chases it. So for me, that was a clear representation of the case, because for the information I know, it's the role reversal. So it was a woman that was killed potentially by her husband. And there is a third theory which has come out since then, which is called the owl theory, which basically they believe that he could have been killed by, or she could have been killed by a rogue owl in the building, which is pretty nuts to me, but it's something that is part of the lore of the staircase case. Yeah. So I want to start at the end of the film, because this is going to be a spoiler discussion, by the way, guys. So I don't want to get into this without giving spoilers away, because it's hard to have this discussion without that. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware before we go any further that there will be spoilers for the film here. But I want to talk about the end of the film, because initially when I came out of my first viewing of the film, this is when me and you initially had the discussion about this potential video, because I was of the idea that she didn't do it, and you was more on the idea of she did do it.
Yeah, that's the debate begins with this. I think she did, you think she didn't, but like, okay, go on.
No, of course. And I do feel like my opinion of did she or didn't she has changed a lot, and it's flip-flopped continuously over the 3 times that I've seen the film.
Yeah.
I'm probably a little bit more on your side now, but I still want to have this discussion and work out how we both get to that point. But the end of the film is a great place to start, because we'll get to the script and we'll get to the performances and the direction of the film. But at the end, the court case basically says that she didn't do it. She gets to go home with her son. And the film kind of puts you in that pretense of, okay, she didn't do it. They've told you the story. But once you sit on it for another 5, even just 5-10 minutes, you kind of notice, no, that's not kind of what has happened here. It's just putting you in an idea that just because the court has said that she didn't do it, that does not mean that she didn't do it. And I feel like that's a very big part of the story itself. So when you finished the film and the court come back and said she wasn't guilty, was you automatically, okay, she done it? Why did that kind of idea come to your head straight away?
Well, because of course the film, it's a tricky, complex, intricate film. There's a point to, I think, everything, what she's showing, and it's not simply that there is an ambiguous do you or do you not believe her question. I think there is a point to what Triet is trying to say and show. And like you said, as soon as you get to that court point, I'm like, obviously the court has been convinced and dangerous, they all say tricked or otherwise coerced into believing the testimony. But that's essentially what this entire second half of the film with the court stuff is about, is like you have this really tense back and forth between the prosecutor who in the French court makes a lot of insane accusations. You're like, I don't know how he's getting away with this. But I enjoy that, because I'm like when he brings up the book and when he brings up the recording, you're like, this is intense, but also once you get into it, you're like, there is a relevance to this. There is something important to this. But then you get to the decision, and I think, this is all dangerous territory, but I think we can have a safe space to discuss it here, which is that there are a lot of real cases in the world where innocent people get accused and where guilty people get off. It's not uncommon. It does happen. It's not like it's this rare anomaly. It happens quite often. And there are entire organizations that are designed and built around helping these people, especially the innocent ones who get sent to prison, and kind of helping exonerate them, because there's either the evidence supports them in a way that the court can't reject, or the opposite, which is, I think, the case in this one, which is that there's not enough concrete evidence. There's not enough to convince completely, but it leans a bit. And of course, the ending comes down to the kid's testimony, which is another, I think, staircase reference, because in the staircase, the case about this guy, Michael Peterson, his kids are a prominent part of his case as well. They were interviewed. There's a major part of it in the documentary about him. It's also essentially this question of, how do the kids feel? And that's what the Anatomy of a Fall does, is it brings the kid in. And then you get to that point, and I'm like, I don't believe in a lot of films these days. I don't believe the surface level presentation of guilty or not guilty. I believe that's presented to us, and then it's for us to consider. And everything else that I think the film presents is why I lean towards the she did it side. And that I think Triet's point is almost, she did it, but what if, here's all the things to make you believe that she didn't do it. Here's how she gets the court to believe that she didn't do it, and here's why. And that's to answer your question, that's how I feel.
Yeah, I definitely leaned in towards she didn't do it, and I do feel like I was pushed in that direction, because like you said, the back end of the film is heavily on the she didn't do it argument side. Obviously, with the son's testimony, with the information that comes out about the dog and the swallowing of pills, and then, of course, the other scene in the car where they're discussing kind of the dog passing away and stuff. I do feel like it was heavily pushed in that direction towards the end of the film, which in the end probably put me in that idea that she didn't do it. But of course, there is so many parts of this film that push you in the direction of, oh, she 100% did it. And I feel like that's one of the best parts of the film, and why I love it so much is that I can't 100% say that she did it, but the more that I think about it and the more that I watch it, the more I think she did. And a lot says to this, it could be a male and female representation type of thing. And I put out a tweet on Twitter and just asked people who had seen the film, do you think she'd done it or do you think she didn't do it? And I think about 75% of people come back and said she didn't do it. And I was very intrigued to find out what percentage of that was male and what percentage was female and how that has an effect on how we view the film. But it seems like it's very much a split down the middle type of thing. It doesn't seem to be a differential between male and female, which I was slightly surprised by, just based on some of the, especially the assault scene that we don't see, we just hear. So I want to get onto the recordings bit because this is a big part of the film and one of the substantial parts of evidence that comes in relation from the other side trying to say that she'd done it. These recordings, she didn't know this recording was happening supposedly, but she's fully aware that her husband has been recording conversations of them and admitted to not knowing when some of them happened. So how do you feel like that recording either bigs up your argument or kind of throws it to the wasteland? Because I do feel like that whole scene is very pivotal in painting her in a certain type of way and putting him on that kind of, that he's basically forced into his lifestyle through her. And then the book stuff. So the book reading, we won't get to the actual specifics of what the book says. We'll get to that in a moment, but the actual book reading and stealing a part of his idea from his book and the recording, both are kind of simultaneous together, I think, in trying to prove a point of her being very much overbearing and pushing him into a corner, so she might be in a position to do what she done. How do you feel the book idea not being stolen, kind of being used, and the recording have an effect on the audience's decision?
I mean, I think both audience-wise, as in Triette makes this point through it, but also court case-wise, I think the whole point is ultimately to, like, up until that point, there's this question of, is she capable of murdering her husband? You know, does she have this like evil bone in her to, and it's not even this question of like murdered her with a knife, because that's the interesting thing about this case. It's kind of like did she push him over the edge? Like let the fall kill him kind of thing. And, or, you know, whatever made his, like, I think I don't know if he was on a ladder, but, you know, working in his room and wobbled him enough to fall over. And at that point, when you listen to this recording, and I think this is also a fascinating point of the film, is as a man watching this, am I accusing a woman? And I would love to have female perspectives on this. I wish we could have a huge debate with, you know, women giving their perspective too. But as a man, I'm watching it, and I wonder if it's my male reaction being like, oh, she's horrible, or if it's actually, and I think this is a good question the film brings up, is it a clear presentation of her being someone who has this ability to, at the right time and the right moment, snap and become so extremely angry that she could literally kill him, or at least do something enough to lead to his death? And I think the whole point of the recording, as brought up by the prosecutor, is that instance of, look, she can do it. And I mean, there's this tricky territory of like, yeah, but just because she was angry in this moment, does that mean she would actually kill someone? I don't know. You know, I'm not a psychologist. I can't analyze it into that degree. But I think a lot of that court case question is, without the final evidence, like, of her literally doing it, what's the next thing you could do? You can question her character. You can actually show that she's capable of doing that. And I really do think, I think there are enough hints, not only with the book and not only with this recording, but there are hints where she's become a manipulative, angry person. I even think the opening scene with her doing this interview and getting upset with things and watching her play the interviewer and kind of hit on her is also an implication that says, hey, this person can, is capable of manipulating people and also capable of doing things that is for their particular gain. And I think that's one of the scary things. And that reminds me of my overall feeling, which is that I think it's a film about a guilty person and how we are, the audience and the people involved in the case, led to believe she's not guilty. What leads us to this, you know, what are the pieces that between the kid, between the three things you mentioned at the end of the film, but also just this kind of idea of like, okay, an evil person, a killer who's not a serial killer, he's not going to be, this evil looking guy who you think, oh, instantly you look at them, you think he's a killer. That's kind of the point of the film. She may be a killer, and what then leads us to believe that she isn't. But this recording is, I think, so strong because it's a reminder that she absolutely has that ability. She can go to those depths of like, oh my God, she's scary, she's vicious, she's driven to do something that is for her gain, which is a lot of what the film is about. Not only with like her other relationships, and a lot of things they bring up in court is like everything she's doing with living her life is kind of like she wants it for her benefit. And if something gets in the way of that, and if it bothers her, she will, pun intended, push them out of the way, like get to that point.
I do feel like there's pretty much with the film, I feel like every argument for, there's an argument against.
Mm-hmm.
And I do feel like it's extremely well balanced in that retrospect. And that,
of course.
The credit has to go to the screenplay, because it is phenomenal, the screenplay, the way it drips information to the audience and to the courtroom, because the audience in effect are the courtroom at the same time, because we're all finding out this information concurrently. It's not a case of the audience finds out 1 minute and then the court finds out 10 minutes later. It is a very slow process. So you just mentioned the interview scene, and I want to touch on this because I don't feel like, I initially, when I watched the film, didn't feel like it was a flirtatious type of conversation. It's only when they brought that up in the courtroom that I started to maybe see it in that light. And I think that was a brilliant way done by the filmmakers, because you start questioning your own opinion of what you saw, because you saw the whole conversation on camera. So we know exactly how it was, not how the court interprets it, how we interpret it. So did you initially feel like she was flirtatious with the female reporter, or do you feel like that is something which has been overly kind of sexualized because of her previous lesbian relationship outside of marriage?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of both. Like you, I didn't think of it as flirtatious at the start. I thought, oh, okay, this is a context they need for more of like what's going on upstairs with the music and her husband being annoying to her. And I felt like that's the context is less flirtatious with her, more she's interested in this woman and she doesn't like what her husband's doing, so she gets angry at her husband and then goes up and kill him. I'm not saying that's exactly what happens, but you know what I mean? That's kind of a hint I got from it. But I felt like you said, I didn't feel like there was much to think about with her flirtatiousness. However, this does bring up an interesting point, which is something I've wanted to clarify for a lot of people, is that I've read a few reviews from women who say this is a misogynistic film, or it's a film about misogyny, about how men accuse women of these things. And the reason I think that should be debunked is that this part of it that you're discussing about the extramarital relationship she's had with other women is actually, once again, another Staircase reference. And that if you gender swap, just like this movie, Michael Peterson, the guy from the real life Staircase Cave, was also accused in court of having extramarital gay relationships, and that was used against him as well. And so I think Triet is just simply gender swapping that. But because of that gender swap based on reality, I don't think you can say, oh, therefore, just, how dare you accuse her of being, angry towards her husband because of these relationships she's having with other women. And that setup of the interview is kind of like a way to, like you said, make you feel something at the start and then question yourself later once you kind of understand what you've seen and how that plays into the context of the bigger picture of who she is. And it almost, to me, really does connect to this idea of that she's more pissed at her husband getting in the way of her hitting on someone than she is with anything else in that scene, which almost leads to her anger. Like her whole, I think it's like after that scene, she says she's going to go take a nap, right? I think that's what happens.
Yeah.
And
she
it's
goes to work on one of her books and then ends up taking a nap shortly after because of the music. Which
is the greatest, like, oh, she didn't push him because she was napping. But you're like, how can you definitively say that? But that's I think the moment where you're like, okay, she's the reference to her being in these relationships is not the problem. It's a reference to her desire to be in these relationships and that's the funny thing is that as you learn about her relationship with her husband, you learn that it's not the best relationship. There's a lot of turbulence between them and a lot of issues. And that at that point in their lives, she did want to be with other people. She did want to be with this interviewer and almost like chase that relationship. And how dare he mess with that? But he doesn't know that, or maybe he does. I don't know exactly how much he knows about her.
Yeah, so I want to lean a bit more into the she was guilty type of argument, right? Because we want to kind of get both sides. For me, there's one aspect that I'm still trying to get my head around, even after seeing it a few times, is during the whole court case, and especially this scene in the restaurant after she's found not guilty, before she goes home, her and the male lawyer, there seems to be something there. There's anytime they're having conversations, they're very close together, and it's obviously done on purpose. The way they're framed, it's kind of like that persona type of thing, where they're kind of crossing over, and it's 100% done on purpose. And that there kind of pushes me maybe into the idea that maybe she did do it, and maybe she's just kind of over the whole idea already because of the fact that the husband's dead. If he died by suicide, she should be kind of distraught by it. But there's clearly a sexual tension there between the two. There's no real, I don't feel like there was enough information given about who they are together previously and what their previous relationship is. So this here, that is one of the key things for me that does push me in a direction of she was guilty and she did kill her husband. I have a magnitude of reasons why I don't think she was guilty, and we will get to those, but this this is type of the guilty moment, right? So how do you feel about that whole relationship? Because obviously in court, the lesbian relationship is brought up, but the actual same-sex kind of cheating is never brought up. And I do feel like that opening scene is an idea to push you in that direction. But I do feel like the solicitor stuff was definitely put in there for a reason. And the framing of the scenes together was 100% done on purpose. Where do you stand on kind of that kind of viewpoint?
I'm with you on that. Similarly, again, Triet's ability to do this is excellent. Is it similarly to what you were saying before about the interview and how you look at it differently later? Is that at first this guy comes in and a great performance by this guy, Swan Arloud, I think is his name is. He comes in as her lawyer, and he's like, I'll take your case, I'll defend you. And you, like you said, you kind of don't really know their relationship. But on one hand, I was thinking he's defending her because he's hired by her, which is the way lawyers kind of have to work. But also he also, like, at first I'm like, there's a reason he wants to defend her. And there's that really great scene at the beginning where it's in all the trailers where she comes in and she says, I didn't do it, right? And there's that pause, and he says, well, that doesn't really matter, And I think that's a great scene because it establishes this like unspoken connection they have, which is that to him, it really doesn't matter. His goal is to defend her no matter what. And then, like you said, once you see later their connection, I started to think there's two things here, which is that one of the reasons they're playing this is because she's guilty, and that Triet's point is involves two people, her son and him, which is that, number one, he is so driven in every possible sense as a lawyer to exonerate her and make sure she's not guilty and prove that it's a suicide, because he does love her, because there is a romantic interest here. And that is a factor that allows people to overcome their guilt and shame and these dark sides of you, because you're like, I don't, maybe she did kill someone, but I love her. I can get over that, And that's what I thought. And then I thought the same thing with the kid. The kid kind of comes around to this realization that he's like, I don't want to live a life without a mom. And at this point, it would be without a mom or a dad, because he's alone, and he would have no one. And so rather than, and this is again a staircase reference, is that rather than her kid admitting that he thinks she did it and sticking with it, which is what he did at the start, he changes his opinion on things to join the side of, okay, she's not guilty because I want my mother to not be in prison and to have someone as my parent from now on. And the staircase case is the same thing. When he first went to court, his kids were, I don't know exactly which side it is. I think they were on his side. And then now, 20 years later, his kids are like, no, he did it and I don't like him.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting switch where, like, again, at the time he first went to court, the staircase guy, his kids were on his side. Similar sort of family relationship. And I feel that that this also applies to her lawyer, because I think her lawyer is a little bit like, of course, it's his job to defend her, but I think he's extra defensive of her because he has this romantic interest where he wants to make sure that she is completely, fully cleared of anything, because he's like, I believe her. I'm convinced by her, so I'll do my job to convince the court as well, because he has that interest.
Yeah, no, definitely, for sure. And one of the things you bring up the kid, right? And I want to get his name right, because honestly, a unbelievable performance.
Yeah,
Milo Machado-Graner, right? Graner, I believe. He is so good in this film, and he, like you mentioned, he kind of seems to change his opinion as the film goes on as to whether his mother killed his father, which for a young child, a partially impaired visually as well, it's not an easy thing to go through. And I do feel like one of the best things about the film is not only did the audience not know if she's guilty or not, I feel like every single character in the film is on the fence, and they completely flip-flop to, did she do it or didn't she? I do feel like the beginning of the film with the kid, especially when I don't know if this is 100% correct, but his godmother, I believe, is the husband's sister. And there's a scene when he first dies where he's kind of lying in bed, the son, and the godmother comes in, and he doesn't show any affection to his mum at all. And it's kind of a bit, it was that kind of section. I was thinking, okay, maybe he's heard things. Maybe there's information that we don't know, because we don't see everything. The film can't be a 10-hour docuseries, right? It can't give you every bit of information leading up to this. But I feel like the son's flip-flopping definitely pushed me in a direction of, she didn't do it. And let's talk about that pivotal scene with the dog, which, again, we're talking about performances in this film. That dog, I've never seen a animal give such a performance in my life. And I don't honestly know how they pulled a performance like that out of a dog. It's pretty insane. But the scene with the dog is a very pivotal scene, and it seems to be that scene where the kind of tides turn for Sandra Hüller's character. How do you feel that one scene with the dog just affects the audience's viewpoint of the mental stability of the husband? Because the mental stability of the husband is a very key factor on thinking, did she or didn't she do it? Up until that point, there wasn't enough evidence given that showed that he was of that depressive state where he would think or contemplate suicide. So how do you feel like that scene affects the viewer's kind of idea on guilty or not guilty?
I think it's what you're saying, which is, I think it leads them all to saying, oh, he definitely killed himself at that point. And I think it's because I don't buy it personally. And the reason is that it's a really complex kind of occurrence of events that they're trying to get you to convince of. They're like, first things first, that that the man who dies, that he tried to kill himself, number one. And that the proof of that is that he, I guess, threw up the pills, which the dog then ate.
Yeah.
And then the dog got sick. And then the kid, to prove that it was his father who took the pills and the dog who ate them, re-sickens his dog. And then the dog, it's proven. And then there's the scene which leads to the car conversation, which is then another strong point to say, oh, he was talking about himself. He wants to kill himself, right? Again, I don't buy all of it, because they're little pieces. They're like, first things first, there's absolutely no proof and assurance that just because these pills were eaten by the dog, that means he was trying to kill himself. Secondly, that doesn't really mean anything with the dog. Like, a dog is not a human, you know? You can't apply typical courtroom psychology to a dog. Like, a dog can be both innocent and guilty. A dog can know something but not show it. A dog can just, like, want to eat this or do this just because it's a dog. And I think the whole point of this scene is also to, I've read a lot of analysis I've read online says that the final scene of the very ending scene of the movie is the one that clears her, because the dog shows up and cuddles her. And I was like trying to analyze. I was like, why does that clear her name? Right. And the analysis is that because the dog doesn't, maybe you can clarify this for me. The dog doesn't hate her, I guess, which means that which means that the dog hasn't, it wasn't, I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't get why people think that the dog coming to her at the final scene clears her completely because of the dog scene before. Like, none of it to me really, like, I understand why when you present it, you're like, oh yeah, this is clearly set up to show you that he is suicidal and that there is, like you said, there's something weird going on with him, though not definitively suicidal, but something strange with him. And that this can all lead to the final scene of it being like, oh, well, the dog's there. It's okay. It's strange to me how this all connects. And can you also answer a question for me? Is there not a scene, because I might have forgotten this, in the courtroom where the psychologist talks about his mental state too? Is that in there?
That is correct. Yes, there is a very long sequence where the psychologist is talking about basically how she's very overbearing, how she doesn't allow him any wiggle room to kind of express himself. And I think that is shown in this scene where they're talking about the stealing of the book part, and where she kind of takes the best part of his book and makes it her own. And yeah, basically the psychiatrist for the husband comes out and says, well, he wasn't suicidal. He had very much concerns about you and the way you were, the way you kind of blamed him for the visual impairment of the son. And there seemed to be, that scene again really pushed it in the direction of she done it. And there's a lot of scenes in the film that push you in that direction of she done it. And I just want to go back to the pill scene for a moment, because there's nothing to say that she didn't crush pills up into his food when he got sick the first time.
Exactly.
Right? There's nothing to say that was the case. And again, I don't feel like that is something that really needs to be debated too much, because I don't think it's that key in the discovery of did she or didn't she. The end scene with the dog when they're cuddling up together, I don't know, it just felt like a great way to end the film. She's finally there. She's got a release of not going to prison for killing her husband. And the dog is there, and the dog is alive and well. The dog has not been killed for research, you could call it. I don't feel like there's a correlation between the two. And I don't think it automatically says she's not guilty. But no, there's a lot of, I think the best thing for this is you can't come to a final decision of did she or didn't she. There's only one person that knows it. It's Justine Trier. She didn't tell Sandra Hüller. She didn't tell the audience by the end of it, did she 100% not do it? And I haven't seen any articles or any discussions with Justine where she specifically states whether she did or didn't do it. And we keep bringing up the staircase case, and it has to be brought up because there's so many similarities to it. And to this day, I spoke about the owl thing earlier. That was something that came out way after the case. This wasn't something that came up during the court case, but with evidence after. And I feel like this is very much part and parcel with why the film is the way it is. It's not meant to have a definitive answer. You're meant to constantly judge and question your decision making.
Exactly.
So a lot of the evidence-based stuff, it could go either way, right? There's not enough in the evidence that kind of puts you in a case of she did it or didn't she do it. Did you, from the evidence that was given in relation to the blood splatter stuff, was there anything there with the way they had the dummy being thrown off the roof and the way they were always there to see it? Do you think that was put in to push us in a direction of she did it or didn't do it? Because I do feel like there was multiple moments of that dummy coming out the window. It wasn't just done once. The dummy was thrown out the window multiple times. And I do feel like it was done on purpose to put you in that direction of her pushing him. But also, they show the size of the man, the size of the banister where it would have had to happen. And as a woman who's clearly a much smaller in stature than the man, it didn't seem like it was that possible unless you have that miraculous, had a few too many to drink and you've got a bit more power than you expected. But I want to speak on the evidence and the dummy scenes, because I do feel like the dummy scenes were done multiple times to kind of push you in that pushing direction.
Yeah, and I know I'm sorry to sound like a broken record, but again, a staircase reference is the blood splatter. The blood splatter, and the same thing happens in the staircase, which is that I found this so much, I don't want to say fun, because fun is horrible discussing a murder case, but fun in Justin Triet's film, because you do the thing where you're like, the first guy comes in is like, blood splatter is definitively murder, right? And the next guy comes in is like, blood splatter's not. And you're like, what am I supposed to believe? You know, I love that dynamic of like how one, you know, expert can say this and then another can say this because it messes with your head. And again, there was a blood splatter analysis in the staircase case as well. There was also one person come in and said this and one person came in and said this. Same kind of reference to here where like you can not do it. Like you, I wasn't convinced by the blood splatter just because it's important, but it's like, it's not a minor detail because, you know, the blood matters and this kind of thing matters. But it was like, what it led me to think when I was watching these scenes is, like you kind of said, is that I have no idea how she could have pushed him and how you know, there's a couple of shots, like I think when no one's there and it's like this kind of fly-in drone shot into the top of the chalet. And I'm like, I don't like. Maybe I just, you know, my imagination.
Awkward, right? It doesn't sit, especially the top, the roof bit where he's working.
Yeah.
Every time they kind of show that shot, it's never kind of just a symmetrical shot of the triangle window. It's always done at an angle where the window seems really small, and it's like there's no way a human body could get pushed through there because they're saying about the head thing, the head trauma, and there's no blood splatter found in the loft room where they're saying that he would have fell from. So I just find the whole pushing aspect, especially from that location, to be completely out of the question. I do feel like if he got pushed, it would have been from the first floor banister, which would have made sense based on the conversation that was had with the kid. And I do feel like when the police come to the house and they question him and they put the headphones on him and he has to basically tell what tempo or kind of what loudness they were speaking at, trying to get if there was an argument happening when he left. I do feel like that kind of takes out the idea of the top floor being a murder location.
Yeah.
Which really pushes you into the only way that she could have done it is on that balcony with a whole lot of strength and him being off balance anyway. And I just don't know if that was, again, I don't know if that was physically possible to do.
Yeah, it was a good question.
If she did do it and she did murder him, how do you think she'd done it based on the information that we're given in the film?
It's hard to say because
the big things which I feel like she didn't do it. I just don't.
Yeah.
The evidence kind of pushed me in a direction, and script is one thing, story is one thing, character is another thing. But the main thing for me is the information that is given in the court case. That I feel like it's a very big thing because I watch a lot of these courtroom drama films and a lot of real life stuff, and you're kind of like, how could they say they're not guilty? Like the OJ stuff. It's just the evidence pushes you in a direction. And to this day, I still feel like OJ Simpson killed his wife. But the evidence was pushed in a direction that the courtroom said, no, he didn't. So I guess my point is, how did she do it?
Yeah. I mean, but Rhea, that's exactly, you could use the same claim here is that, she did it, but the evidence led people to believe she didn't. And is that one of the ideas behind this?
Yeah.
No, I'm with you. That was my biggest doubt too. Is like every time they showed this thing, I'm like, how could he have died here? Like, I mean, it's the only thing I'll say is that not being, not having studied physics, not being a crime scene expert, not being anything. I can't definitively say that, just because I feel like it's impossible, it wasn't possible. Because actually, one of the things I've learned watching so many crime cases is like the craziest things happen. The most remarkable kind of thing can happen. The same thing with the staircase cases. I'm like, how could a woman falling down the stairs lead to her death? I guess she breaks her neck in a certain way.
Yeah.
And this is the same kind of thing. You're like, did she like shove him with a lot of force? Is it, and it's the only thing that really makes me be like, I don't know. But you know what, actually, when you were saying this, I was also thinking that I also couldn't necessarily believe that he just slipped and fell either. because of the depiction of this building, I'm like, he would have had to have been like halfway out of the window, completely unbalanced. And one of the things I think they do try to reiterate kind of minorly in the court case is that he's not particularly the kind of person that would have put himself in a situation where he was unbalanced and would have led to being slipping. However, you're right. He needs to have been pushed then, or something needs to have been set up. And I do think the opening with the kid, as you mentioned, explaining the noise and stuff, I do think when I first heard that, I mean, before you even get to court, because that's very early on, when I first heard that, I was like, that's proof that she did it. Because the kid, this is before the kid has time to, by the way, we should refer to him as his name. What's his name? Samuel, right?
His name is Samuel, yeah.
So before Samuel.
Sorry, his name's Daniel. His name's Daniel. Samuel is the dad.
Yeah, Daniel. So, but this is before Daniel has time to decide and make up his mind about his mom. So at that point, the police kind of catch him admitting that, at first he says it's this, but when he finally says, oh, they were actually really arguing, you're like, oh, he's admitting something that he shouldn't have, but now you got him on it, and now he's basically coming out saying, yeah, they were fighting. And that we need to, if you put the pieces together and you say, okay, she went to nap, then she got in this fight with him, and in this fight, it could have been as simple as and like a temper, like you're fighting, but you're not really trying to kill him, but you do a kind of push, and that could have caused him to tumble over, and that to me is more believable than slipping. But at the same time, as you're saying, there's not enough evidence in either direction to prove that she did do that and that was possible. And I don't buy the blood splatters either way. There isn't enough hard evidence in that particular moment, which is the complexity of a case like this. The same thing, again, with the staircase never being solved, is there's not enough concrete proof of anything. And I don't know. It's just, this is why I love discussing with you. Cause I'm like, do you have more ideas that made you feel like she didn't do it? Is there anything else that you really felt like was a solid piece of, this is it, that once you see this, you can say it?
It just seemed very much like him playing loud music during an interview when she's had a few drinks, and she doesn't seem like, she's obviously clearly slightly irritated by the music that's being played. Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, playing the instrumental version of PIMP by 50 Cent is a great, just unbelievable choice of music. And I'm sure I weren't the only one who thought that her husband was a producer upstairs trying to make an MC trying to make a song upstairs.
Yeah.
But no, I don't feel like she looked like she was in the state to go and do something of that extent.
Mm.
Which, again, it could be a case that she did murder him, but it was accidental murder. It didn't happen via, I'm going upstairs, I'm going to kill my husband. It could be a case of, I'm going to go upstairs, we're going to have an argument, but it's going to turn into this, and then I've got to work my way around it. Yeah. But the setting is one thing. The snow, the actual impact of him falling from, whether it's the first floor, second floor, wherever it may be, the impact of the snow, he falls anywhere else other than that kind of unit that's outside in the garden. I say the garden, it's all just land, but that unit being there is a big thing. That is he's obviously hit his head there, and it's kind of like, hit him with an object. But with that substantial area, is there enough time for her to kill him with an object and to dispose of that object? And the answer is probably yes, because it's where the property is located in the French Alps is it is located basically in the middle of nowhere, and it's very much. It's proven in the court case as well with the snow that the blood could completely just disappear within a matter of minutes because of the amount of snow. So the location, and not just the location itself, but the actual terrain and the weather, there's so many things that are there to, sometimes I feel like they're there to push you in a direction of murder, and then other times I feel like it's the opposite way. And this is my favorite film of the year, and I do feel like the reason why is because every positive has a negative, every guilty has a non-guilty, and it's done to such a minute degree that I just can't still work out if she did or didn't do it. And the first time I watched it, we spoke in a chat, and I said, no, she didn't do it. She definitely didn't do it. And then the second time I watched it, I was like, no, she definitely did do it. And maybe our conversation kind of pushed me a little bit in that direction.
Mm.
But the third time watching it yesterday, I just don't feel like she would have done it. I just don't know.
Ooh.
I don't know if she would have done it. I just don't see. And there's clear moments, but would he have killed himself? So I think, honestly, where I'm kind of at the moment is he probably died from an accidental fall of them arguing without any actual murderous intent. And that's kind of probably where I'm at. And I don't feel we'll ever get an answer on it. And maybe Justine don't have an answer. Maybe she's been playing us for a loop the whole time, and she wrote it without an idea if she'd done it or not. And that was the whole point. And maybe that's why it's such a good script, because maybe she was trying to find out herself through writing the screenplay with, she didn't write the screenplay just on her own. There was somebody else involved in it. Arthur Harari also co-wrote the script with Triet. So there's definitely an idea there that potentially she's clearly aware of the staircase, because there's so many similarities that it's just hard to distinguish the difference between the two cases, right? Maybe she wrote this film from a different perspective, from the male to female perspective switched, because maybe she feels like her female instincts maybe pushed her in one direction during the staircase court case, and maybe she wanted to flip it over and write the script to try and work out herself if she believes he done it or not. I know that's an incredibly insane thing to think, that someone would go right and make a film to try and work out if somebody killed their wife or not. But I don't know. Maybe that is.
No, I think you're onto something. I think she was inspired by the idea that the staircase is also an unsolvable case. That there will never ever be a final answer. We will never ever truly know what happened. Therefore, let's write this script on this idea of what do you do when you're presented with this, and who do you believe, and why do you believe them? I think the best analysis of this film is that what it makes you think is this: why do you believe someone? Why do you believe this evidence? Why are you convinced by this but not by this? Like you said, this constant back and forth makes you question yourself and makes you question. I remember the big conversation at Cannes was perception. It's this idea of, how do you perceive this incident? How do you perceive this person? Do you believe the kid or not? And why? All these ideas that I think are fascinating to discuss, with the implication, as you said, that we will never truly know. There will never be an answer. And this makes me want to bring up as a kind of nice way to sort of start wrapping up, is this idea that I found this quote from her in an interview, and it was during recently, November actually, and they asked her, and this is what she said. They tried to say, oh, can you tell us is she guilty or innocent? Of course, she wouldn't answer. Like you said, she'll never answer, right? But her quote is, well, what can I say? It's the same thing as in life. Who knows the real truth? To me, I think that maybe Sandra could be not guilty of murder, but responsible for pushing him to commit suicide. As in, a whole other implication, which is that she drove him crazy and he killed himself. But then she goes on to say, maybe it's a question of, what are we all responsible for in our lives? The film is opening so many other doors. And in a way, I think, well, she lied 2 times in the movie. So maybe we can cast doubt on her and say, is it possible she did do it? But I don't want to say that. That's her quote, which is I was like, when did she lie twice in the movie? So again, Triet kind of knows she puts the pieces, but again, she will never say. But I do think, like you sometimes, where I'm like, I don't think Triet wrote it with a final statement in her mind. However, I also, it's a question for filmmakers. Can you make a movie about a criminal or a court case without having a goal with what you're trying to say with that crime or that court case? Can you make a goal where you don't know? If you're going to make a movie about a criminal, you're going to know, oh, I think this guy's innocent, therefore I'm going to craft everything around that idea that I have, even if I never say it. And I wonder, is it possible as a filmmaker or a storyteller to write a story and to actually deliver the ambiguousness of this person? And never actually, did she, maybe she will tell us in 10 years, but for now we'll never know. But was she capable of writing it in that way? I'm not sure if she was, or if she did write it with an implication, which is either way actually makes sense to me. She wrote it with the idea that she is guilty, and then here's all of us not believing it, or she wrote it with this idea of, she isn't guilty, and here's all the reasons why we end up believing that she is. Whether it is misogyny or whether it is some sort of attack on her for some various reason, all of these things are valid ideas that she presents and brings up in this film.
Yeah, so you talk about the lies. Obviously, one of those is the bruises on her arm, which she says she gets from knocking herself on the kind of the island in the kitchen.
Right.
Bruises, which is then specified that it probably come from either the moment where she killed him or didn't kill him, or the argument that they had that is shown on the audio tapes. And then the other lying moment was in relation to, I believe, what was it?
Yeah, see, now that she said this, I'm like, oh, she's on. She knows.
There's a clear indication there of her knowing that and she seems to push you in the direction of, okay, she may not have specifically pushed him or killed him on purpose, but there's an idea that just because she didn't murder him with a weapon or physically murder him, pushing him into a direction where she's cheated on him, so he has to deal with that. He has to deal with his son being partially blind and feeling a certain type of way that he was at fault for that issue. And then he has to then put up with the fact that he has to teach and can't be a writer. And the fact that his wife stole the idea basically off of him and wrote a book about it, and he hasn't been able to write a book. So all these things has she pushed him into killing himself. And then is that any different from her pushing him off of a... There's so many ways you can look at it, and I do feel like it's an outstanding film. And again, it's my favorite film of the year, and it's only 2 films this year have hit me on, well, I'd say 3 films, but more so this film and The Zone of Interest have hit me on a, not just this is unbelievably technically good, but I'm getting something emotionally from it, and it makes me feel some type of way. And I want to sit down and I want to talk about it for an hour, and I want to hear different people's opinions, and I want to know why someone would go down that route. And that's something that always inspires me in kind of my video creating, writing, filmmaking. Why do we do what we do, and how do we go about getting from point A to point Z? And The Zone of Interest and this film definitely do that for me. And then Oppenheimer, there's a few scenes in that film which just kind of make the hairs on your arms stand up. So those 3 films this year have been the one for me. So let's finish this up. Do you or do you not think she killed him?
I still think she did. But you've given, now I'm like doubting it in a way where I think maybe she either she drove him to kill him, not drove him to kill himself, but drove him to be haphazard enough to end up killing himself, or accidentally had a fight which led him, which is not murder. But now I'm like starting to think like, but this is how I feel. That's after this whole discussion. Now I'm a little bit doubtful, to be honest. With you.
Well, let's just finish. I just want another little thing before we finish. So the moment of the death, it just, again, it doesn't seem very much on cue for the guilty or not guilty verdict. Why would he kill himself at that moment? And why would she murder him at that moment? That would push me more in the direction of it being murder because of the timing of the death. Because he's upstairs playing music, working on the loft. There's nothing there that would be, okay, this is the moment to now kill myself, unless, and this is throwing another spanner into the conversation, if he killed himself on purpose at that moment because that woman was there, had heard the music, and would put his wife in a spot of bother in relation to the murder.
This is a whole other level here, man.
There's so many things, and I've kept you for too long. We've had enough of a discussion about it to get people to understand our viewpoints and see how people feel about it. So what I want everyone to do, if you've made it through this 50+ minute video, is let us know in the comments your thoughts, and don't hold back. Let us know if you think she did it or not, and your reasonings behind that. But Alex, why don't you give the viewers a quick rundown of where they can find all your stuff, mate, and then with that we'll call that the end of the video because I've kept you for a bit too long.
No, this has been like one of my favorite conversations. So I'm glad we could do this. And thank you for doing this with me. As always, you can find me on Twitter or X at First Showing. And I run the site firstshowing.net, and you can also find me on Letterboxd/firstshowing. And those are my main places to catch me.
All right, perfect. I'll put all the information in the description as well, so you can go follow Alex. I am going to be doing a few more of these videos, not just this type of discussion, but going to discuss prequels, sequels, some other stuff, and just get people involved so we can have discussions and try and work out yes, no, right, wrong, or many other things. So until then, peace out.